Good evening. Welcome to my broadcast. It's David Clapp here, live from South Devon for the Cambridge Photography Week, which is fantastic to be asked to speak to you all. And I've got a fun-packed low-light show for you this evening. Right, just a few things to say. The first thing is that we have a comments box, which is at the bottom of your Facebook feed. If you can just let me know you can hear me in there, that's all really good. So at least I get some feedback immediately that everything's going okay, video's okay, and the broadcasting is okay as well. So if you can just drop me a line in the bottom of there, that would be great. I'm not only showing you images, I also feel like a bit of a DJ. I've got my laptop here and I have to sort of use different button presses and skills to be able to get you the images across. So the main thing is at the moment is to get some images over to you, and also for you to be able to interact with me. So use that Facebook comments box at the bottom, which is really cool. The next thing is that what I want to remind everybody is that this does happen occasionally, but we occasionally get people trying to scam these talks. And when I say scam them, I mean as in they'll say to you that it's not a free talk, and actually it's a paid-for talk, and then try and send you Facebook messages to get you to pay for things, stuff like that. Please ignore any of that nonsense. It happens now and again, and I just want to let you know this is a free talk. It's a free educational talk that is to inspire you and to give you a really good concept on how to shoot low-light photography. Now, the other main thing as well is, like I've said, comments in the box, please. If you've got anything you'd like to talk to me about, I've got this handy little feature on the laptop which allows me to be able to monitor the comments as they come in. So if you can, if you've got anything that you think you want to ask me, then please add that in. If I do miss it, what I may do is a roundup at the end, and I'll go through and I'll make sure that I answer your questions as they go. But I also find there's often people here who like to say hello as well at the same time. So that's also quite fun. So I hope you enjoy this. I've got a whole load of exciting stuff to show you using the Canon R6, which was a particularly brilliant camera and has been a brilliant camera for a low light experience, I have to say. I've also got another camera that I wanted to sort of make apparent to you, because of the way that what I do is that I do like to change camera systems to throughout the day, believe it or not, depending on what it is that I'm intending to do. So for example, some of this experience that I did was photographed using a Canon M6 Mark II, and the M6 Mark II represents a lot of the time my day photography. In other words, let me just give you an example of what you would do if you're out taking photographs in a city. Right, if you're going to carry masses of equipment, in other words, a very heavy 10-kilo bag with a tripod, and walk around with that for a considerable amount of time, you're going to get exhausted. And I found that from my experiences of shooting cities all over the world, the best thing to do is as follows. The first thing is to make sure that you're carrying just the kit that you need. Firstly, go out, if you're going to do a dawn shoot, go out in the morning using various bits of kit. So in other words, full frame camera and various lenses, tripod, etc. Then come back to the hotel, have breakfast, and leave all the heavy stuff there. And then what I do is I swap systems, and I go over to a smaller bag, which contains, in this instance for this experience, it was an M6 Mark II, and I have 3 lenses in there. I've got an 11 to 22, I've got a 18 to 55, and a 55 to 200. So it's an APS-C camera, of course, and it covers the range of, which will essentially be 16, 17 millimeters to 320 in a full frame context. So that's one of the most important parts, is to really reduce the kit down. When I put that into a bag, and I have just the bag with me and a couple of extra polarizers, things like that, then I find that the whole kit weighs no more than 2 kilos. Now, having a 2-kilo bag around you means that, of course, what you can do is you can have another separate bag, water, bits that you need, things like that, and everything doesn't become really camera centric. Now, when I get back in the evening, early evening, should we say, before sunset. Then I'll go back to the hotel, change, get all the gear. So I'll get the full frame camera, tripod and everything, and then go on a mission to get to a specific point, to a specific place to start all the photography off, which will really move things forward in that sense. In other words, I will not be exhausted, wandering around with 9 kilos on my back, feeling completely crushed after 6 hours. And sometimes, and I have to make you very aware of this, is I will be out from first thing in the morning until at least 9 p.m. And that might even incorporate, as it did with London in this instance, a tube journey back as well. So of a day, I will be out from somewhere in the region of, if I'm centrally located, 6:30 in the morning until at least 9 o'clock at night. So this is exhausting. I mean, exhausting. And if you do this for 3, 4, 5 days in a row, let's say 3 days in a row and be reasonable, you're going to be knackered. And I mean properly knackered. Day 2, you'll realize that all the walking up and down steps, all the underground, all the carrying, the lugging of camera gear can just get too much. So it's a great idea to use systems in different ways. Now, the first thing I want to do is to show you basically some scenes that I've done in central London. Some of these are icons, and there's nothing wrong with going and photographing icons, by the way. Now, in my instance, when I first began photography, one of the things I like to do was remove the complexity of composition. So what I could do was concentrate on camera technique. So if you feel guilty about going and shooting some kind of cliche, and this is very much a cliche, don't feel guilty. Why did I go there and shoot this cliche? I did that because this was the first night that I arrived. I got there late afternoon, went to the hotel, was staying out in Hounslow, and caught the tube in and wandered around some of the Thames, essentially just playing around with the Canon R6, which I'd been loaned by Canon for, I think I had it for about 5 days. 3 of those days, it was lashing with rain, like it always is when you get any loan equipment. And the remaining 3, I think it was 2 or 3 we had over the weekend, were completely fine. So it was overcast. There wasn't very much compelling sunshine or compelling weather, but it didn't matter, because the thing is the great thing about this is you can play around with all sorts of different techniques, everything from using neutral density filters like a 10 stop or a 6 stop, and also play around with low light photography in the way that I've been doing here. This was taken quite a lot later in the evening, about 7:30 at night. Now, the camera's unfamiliar to me at the time, so I was very keen to sort of play around and test out the camera itself, and also to be able to work out the high ISO performance. And also I was quite keen to find out exactly how the camera was going to respond with regard to its inbuilt image stabilization, the IBIS feature. Of course, having that and then having the image stabilization on the side of the lens is another really great tandem that will give you the potential to handhold these sorts of images. Now, I'll explain to you the ones that are handheld. This is not handheld. This is on a tripod, and this is a long exposure. This is I think it says at the top there 30 seconds. So I've gone down to the Thames. It's my first evening with the camera. I've gone through a setup on the tube and literally worked out exactly how the camera was going to be set up. I mean, all the usuals take effect. In other words, shooting in RAW. I've set my white balance to a specific value, and I will alter that. I use the K setting all the time, and I will alter that as I go throughout my day. Or, for example, in this situation, when we have mixed color temperatures, I'll choose a color temperature that works with it. I'm a big fan of L brackets. In fact, I can show you what I mean by an L bracket if you haven't seen them, but it's this, which is on a 5D4 that I've got just on the desktop here. And L brackets are extremely good. They allow you to push the camera into, for example, the tripod like so, and then you can stick it into the tripod like that. And if you haven't used L brackets, I severely recommend you do so. I've been using L brackets for getting on for 15 years, I think, something like that, 15 years approximately. And the main thing is that they're extremely good for orientating the camera on a tripod. So all the weight always stays in the middle rather than hanging the camera off the tripod to the side. The camera always stays into the middle. So, for example, there's your ball head. goes in like that or goes in like that. It never does that, if you see what I mean, and causes instability. I'm not using a particularly heavyweight tripod. I'm just using something that's a medium range, if you like, tripod with a rather light ball head on it, and that's perfectly fine for most situations. But remember that the heavier you get, if you're using 100 to 400, for example, or a heavier lens, then you've got to be quite careful about the tripod that you take, because all weekend, and I mean this, all weekend for these particular pictures, it was windy. I mean, properly windy, and the sky has been painted all the way across it there by clouds going across that particular exposure. And if you look at the exposure time, if you can just about pick it out, the top right corner, and I'll leave this box open because it will give some idea also about the brightnesses of the picture and various other things. It's always good to see the histogram. Here you can see the shutter speed says 121 seconds. So one of the things I really like about all modern Canon cameras is the bulb timer mode. And bulb timers can be particularly useful when it comes to long exposures, without having to bother with the whole problems with cable releases. Because cable releases, when it comes down to it, can be quite problematic. My worst thing is standing on them or pulling the lead, yanking the lead. I went through quite a few of them, but now, of course, with a bulb timer, you just don't need that anymore. And this means that I can set a time and I can take a photograph based off that time, press the button on a 2-second timer to initially start the camera, and then click. It will go in and it will effectively do however long I program it. And if you're wondering why I chose 121 seconds, it was actually supposed to be 120. I just made a mistake when I put the time in. So it should have just been 120, so 2 minutes in other words. So I only had EF lenses for this experiment. All I had at the time was the R6 body. So I was using the EF adapter, and I was using my own personal EF lenses, and I can explain to you what they are simply by bringing up a banner at the bottom here. So, for example, I had the R6 at an 8 to 15 fisheye, 1635, a 24 to 70, and then I was using a 100 to 400. Now, I've got a 24 to 70 2.8 as well, but I use the 2.8 mainly for astrophotography because I need image stabilization for this particular type of work. When I'm wandering around cities, etc., this is extremely handy. Now match that with image stabilization on the sensor, and we're starting to get a remarkable setup. So for me, the idea of having a setup that was going to be as steady as I could possibly do handheld was exciting, and that was something I was very keen to have a go at and to exploit as much as possible. The main thing is just to explain to you, if you haven't got much of a clue about the IBIS system, is that the way that it works is if you have a lens that you attach that has image stabilization, when you turn image stabilization on and off on the side of the camera, it will turn the IBIS on and off as well. Never at any given point inside the camera's firmware do you have a menu item that allows you to leave the image stabilization on the lens and off in the body, or the other way round. So in other words, it detects that it's an image stabilized lens, and then what it will do is it will tandem the two together. Now, if you get a lens like, for example, the 2470 2.8, which is what I mentioned before, then basically that specific lens can operate the IBIS, because it doesn't have image stabilization. The IBIS will come on, and then if you go into the menus, I think it's like number 6 or something in the red menus on the back of memory, it will then give you an IBIS menu, and you can go in there and you can set things accordingly. So it's really good, because it means that if you have non-image stabilized lenses, you now have a level of image stabilization. But if you can match that with the image stabilization on the lens with the sensor, you'll be amazed at what it is that you can actually do. It's quite incredible. And let me take you to where I went to before. Just before I ended up down there, which is here. And I went down to Leadenhall, which is a fabulous place to go and shoot the vortex of skyscrapers that you can see here. Now, this is taken handheld. Now, if I go and take photographs like this, normally I would try to do as much as I can handheld, but I know that I would be really pushing the limits here. Now, remember, the R6 is a 20 megapixel camera, and what I'm attempting to get here when I do this is a big vortex, a wide angle shot. So in other words, I'm at 16 millimeters. I've gone as wide as I can, and I'm looking up and centrally composing this light that you can see here. That bit in the middle is critical to the impact of the picture. What is also critical to the impact of the picture is here. Can you see this gap down the side here and this gap here? In other words, I've positioned this lamppost and got it right in between these two buildings, so it creates this sort of wonderful set of shapes as it goes up and around. You'll also notice that it's not actually too dark yet. In other words, I'm not shooting when we're really getting in, we're losing twilight and getting into the depths of darkness. I always find that images like this are not as good, and it's always nice to get tab locks in twilight, but then also to keep shooting and to the point where the pictures aren't working so much. And remember, the biggest problems of this, which are sodium lighting. Sodium lighting is a massive problem because it's usually yellowy orange, and all of this yellowy orange coming from street lights reflects upwards. If you have low cloud, so for example, as it was in this particular shoot, it was cloudy. That is cloud and not sky, by the way. The main thing is that the orange is reflecting off the low cloud. Remember, low cloud can just be a couple of 100 feet high, nothing more than that, and that's going to really turn the sky this sort of weird orangey magenta. Now, you can play around with the camera's white balance if you want, and you can get a variety of different effects. But I have to say, London's not particularly great at giving you beautiful skies in that sense. It's actually more effective in foreign countries that use a lot more LED. And one country I completely recommend that you could go to and shoot all night is Singapore. Singapore is brilliant. You can photograph central Singapore all night, and you'll get blue skies going into magenta skies, and then the skies stay magenta pretty much all night. It's really fabulous. We don't get this horrible orangey sodium problem that you'll get elsewhere. So again, this is f11 pulling in the edges of the frame, 16 millimeters. But the shutter speed up here says 1/4 of a second. So this one I think was even longer. No, that was 1/4 as well. 1/4 of a second. So it can handle 1/4 of a second handheld with good technique. Now, what is good technique in that sense? What will you do that's good technique? And the answer is this, which is there's two ways around it. One is you raise the camera to your eye like so, and you compose the picture through like this, and you line everything up. And as you're lining everything up, you're breathing normally. When you actually get to take the photograph, it's a very good idea to take a big deep breath and hold it so that you aren't moving or inhaling and exhaling. Because if you're holding the camera to your head and you're breathing in and out, the camera will slightly move around as you're doing things, and you've made all these compositional decisions as you're moving the camera about. So the next thing is to set the camera so that you have it in drive mode, like a low speed drive. So you're going to take click, 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 maybe 3 images, something on those lines as you're holding the camera up. Now, why do we use a drive mode? Well, it's quite easy to when you think about it. It's because of the fact being that if you just went up, focus, compose, took one shot, click, and then brought it down and then looked and it was out of focus, you'd have to do the whole thing again of moving around again to get your composition correct. So what I recommend you do is you do a burst, and you do this burst because you usually find the first shot was you still correcting your balance and positioning, and then the second shot will be as pretty much as close to it as you can, and then the third shot you may have thought about, oh, that's enough now, and you're going to drop it. And often, not all the time, but often the first shot is slightly soft, the second shot is sharp, and the third shot is either sharp or slightly soft as you then brought the camera down. So you may find that there's little bits of movement on either end, and if you need to do a burst, a longer burst, you can always throw the pictures away. It really doesn't matter. Now, what's going to happen if you move the lens with a wide angle when you're at 16 millimeters or something like that? What is going to happen? Well, if you're holding the picture like so and you turn the camera very slightly like that, the middle of the image doesn't move very much, but the edges of the image move considerably because of the wide angle. And this is really pronounced when you use things like fisheye lenses. So it's very important for you to be as still as you possibly can. And this is what makes the image stabilized sensor in combination with the lens so fantastic, because it means that you will get all of this additional support when it comes to doing this sort of thing. So again, this is another handheld test. This is a 1/6 of a second, so slightly quicker this time. But Why am I not using a tripod? You're saying to me, possibly. What's the reason that you wouldn't do that? And the answer is because of security. And if you've ever been down to places like Leadenhall and central London, and you've come across security guards, you'll know exactly what I mean. And some of the security guards can actually be reasonably aggressive. Some of them can be reasonably amenable, which is fantastic. And I think that actually, to be honest, with the popularity of photography now, I think that they now phase themselves a bit better. I remember being in central London maybe 5 to 10 years ago, and you would go to a building, they would see you with a professional level DSLR like this, and the next thing you know, they would be on you, telling you that you had to move and you had no rights and you had to delete pictures and all sorts of heavy, aggressive stuff. And I was actually, while taking these photographs, I had a security guard come up to me, and it was the one with the lamppost you saw a minute ago. And he asked me what I was doing, and I just said, I'm just a fan of architecture. I love architecture. And I said, there's not many other places in central London where all these buildings come together, like the Lloyds and everything. I said, I just really enjoy taking photos of them. And it's a nice time of day to photograph. Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Well, would you mind this is actually private property, he said, where we're standing. And I said, no, it's fine. It's not a problem at all. And a big smile and being polite meant I actually came back onto private property and ended up taking a few more photographs. I sort of waved at him. He waved back. If you're just nice, they're nice. If you're going to get all defensive, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube, isn't there, of people saying, know your rights. It's really important to know your rights when taking photos. And it is important to know your rights in that sense as well. Well, don't concern yourself too much with it. You are a tourist as far as they're concerned, and you're an enthusiast. And there's nothing even wrong with telling people you're a photography enthusiast as well. I think it's perfectly fine. So these are all handheld. Everything you're seeing here is handheld. That's a 1/6 of a second. Now look at the composition on this. Everything's a big vortex going up into the top right corner, and it's got this Blade Runner sort of feel about it. I wish it had gone a bit foggier as well. That would have been really good. If there was slightly lower cloud, the tower blocks disappearing into the fog, that would have been something else as well. So perhaps for another grey London trip, that would perfectly work. And I actually modeled this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just come out of here and I'm going to take you back to what happened in the summer. And now let's flip over to a completely different system. Now this is the EOS M6, and this is, I'll show you what lenses I took. I has the M6 Mark II, 11 to 22, 1855, 55-200, like I said, and that's 17 to possibly 320 equivalent. And I'm shooting a lot of these with the 11mm. So this is my 16mm equivalent, 17mm equivalent. And whilst I was there, I walked through there in the afternoon. I was thinking to myself at the time that I wonder what it looks like in low light. It must look quite interesting in low light. And you can see this big building here on the right-hand side is called the Cheese Grater. So you've got the Lloyds building, the Cheese Grater. Around the corner is the Gherkin as well. So there's all these wonderful buildings all in close proximity. But I had the same concept, which was to get the point where the two tower blocks looked like they were almost touching each other, thinning out the picture there, using super wide angle to pull everything into the frame. Actually, as you can see here, reflecting the Lloyds building in the side of this building here. So it's great fun to go and do. And you can see a completely different shutter speed here, 3/50th of a second, obviously so much more light than there was before. So using the M6 actually, believe it or not, has a distinct advantage when it comes to architecture, because, let me just wind you back slightly, when I originally got the EOS M3, it had a 90-degree viewfinder. So basically you could put this viewfinder into the hot shoe on the top and you could turn the whole thing 90 degrees. So you could put the camera pointed vertically upwards and look through it like this. Instead of looking underneath like this, you could look through it straight away. I've kept that viewfinder. I still have the M3 as well, but I will keep that viewfinder. And the reason is because it gives me great possibilities for shooting ceilings, for shooting vertical architecture like this without having to lie on the floor or crouch and look upwards or really put my neck into horrible positions. I can just literally be looking through a periscope, so to speak, almost looking vertically upwards. It's incredibly good. I think it was called the DCF-1. something like that. But anyway, I digress. You could just use the flip out screen on the back and just hold the camera like this and look at the rear screen if you wanted to. That's perfectly fine to do that as well. And of course, you can do that with the R6 and the R5 because they've got flip out screens that you can turn. They're to the side, whereas the M series cameras are on the back and they flip out and flip upwards. But either works particularly well for this job. So I'd spent a lot of time like wandering around like this, looking through something. I must look quite strange to security guards as well. But the main thing is that it really does give you a great concept on how to do this effectively. And here's the variety of pictures I took in and around this area. So a slight variation there. That's the one that you've almost seen that I just did in low light earlier on. Except the main thing is that what I've really tried to do with all these tower block pictures is to get good reflections. So to get reflections in the buildings of the buildings that are surrounding it. And this just adds for an extra sort of dimension to everything as well. So it was a really fun thing to do. So don't ever think the fact that you haven't got your pro DSLR gear or your mirrorless system with you, your EOS R or something like that, these cameras are going to be in any way a hindrance, because they're not by any means. And I have used a smaller APS-C system as my daytime camera for a long time now, for 6 years. And I wouldn't have anything else really for wandering around in the day. I have a very active, history-obsessed wife who will want to be running around central London, going to museums and on and off tubes and going shopping and doing everything else, and trying to keep up with somebody when you've got a tripod in a bag over one shoulder, you've got a bag on your back and a lot of camera kit that you brought everything just in case or because you're going to need it later, etc. It can get really problematic indeed. So I would just say embrace the APS-C as well. Please embrace it. You'll be quite surprised in exactly what you can do. And essentially, just talking about this as we're here and, of course, doing a talk relative to equipment, there's really good cashback deals at the moment on the M6. There's also a ton of cashback deals through on the Campkins site as well. I'll just quickly show that as well. But there's an £85 deal on the M6 in specific. So that's something if you are considering. But there's, as you can see here, there's basically, if you go to the Campkins site and go to the Canon Winter Cashback 2020, there's a rake of really good deals and savings on a lot of stuff that I'm going to mention this evening that can push your photography forwards and get some really great results for you. So, yes, this is the sort of Leadenhall, Bishopsgate area that I wanted to sort of start off with showing. So how long shutter speed can you actually get with the R6? I'm just going to have a look through and see if I got any further. There you go, third of a second. That one says at the top there. So that's a third of a second handheld 16mm 16 to 35 at ISO 1600. Now you may be asking as well, or thinking about, okay, Dave, well, how high does the ISO go up on this camera? What would you be comfortable shooting? And I have to say that you must look at ISO as two independent values. So look at it as follows: a daytime value when there is good, strong lighting, and then a nighttime value. I would happily shoot that 5D Mark IV on the table behind me to 12,800 rather at in daylight. No problem at all. If I had to get a very fast shutter speed for some reason, or a very big aperture and as high shutter speed as I could, I would shoot that camera to 12,800. At night time, it's a 3,200, 6,400 at a push, I would say. Now, for the R6, the R6 is definitely better. Now, it's also, you have to bear in mind, slightly smaller in image size. It's a 20 megapixel camera versus a 30 almost. And you also have to bear this in mind when thinking about the size of this camera with relation to the EOS R5, which is also something to bear in mind. The R5 is 8,192 from memory and on the longest edge, and the Canon 5D Mark IV, of course, is 6,700. So when you actually sort of compare the two, it's roughly getting on for sort of like an eighth bigger than your 5D Mark IV. And if you go the other way, you're looking at sort of, again, like a third smaller than a 5D Mark IV. Do I see any problem with shooting 20 megapixel cameras? The answer is no. And I've never had a problem with shooting lower megapixel cameras. In fact, my particular view of this is that lower megapixel cameras, especially when doing things like hand holding or needing specific criteria, are actually the more powerful tool. So I don't ever think that you're going to compromise a camera with a smaller megapixel. I've just done a print, for example, and the print I did was on a 1DX. 1DX is exactly that. 1DX Mark I is the same as the R6, and I've printed loads of images from a 1DX Mark I, and those images will happily go to A2. So the R6 is no slouch, it's no compromise, and I would push it at night time. It will do a comfortable 6/400, getting a bit noisy, but will respond well to luminosity noise reduction. And this is also the really important point. I would push it to 12/800 if I really had to, but I would be more comfortable at night time. This is at night time at 6/400 being my limit. I think that's a reasonable limit, and I think that also the pictures will respond well to any kind of levels of luminosity noise reduction that you actually have. So do bear that in mind. One final image I wanted to show was one of these ones, which was this is a 15mm 15 fisheye, and fisheyes make remarkable pictures. If you've never had a go with a fisheye in and under a load of tower blocks, you're in for an absolute riot. It's just so much fun. Remember that the fisheye lens will also see 180 degrees in each direction. It's absolutely remarkable. So just to have a go with one, go into Campkins and have a go. Go and get the lens, put it on the camera. Now, why is it 8/15? Does that mean you can zoom it or something? It's because the 8 end is for APS-C and the 15 is for full frame. That's the way to think of it. You can actually, of course, shoot the full frame at 8, but what you'll get is a circle, which in itself is a really fun thing when you think about it. To be able to take pictures that are circles, what's not to love? It must be great fun. You can also do stitch panoramas using that circular fisheye look. It's really quite bizarre. So go and have a try one of those as well. They're really, really great fun. You can also take photographs of people and make their heads really massive and their feet really tiny and all sorts of stupid comedy stuff when you travel, etc. So I really recommend the fisheye. They're such fun if you can get your hands on one and afford one. So here's another fisheye. You can see, and my wife was saying that I have to credit her for this picture because she said, "Oh, come over here. I think this looks really good. That the gherkin looks like it looks like a space station or something with all these flagpoles and things in front of it." I really like it for this little starburst you can see at the top there, and the leading concrete tube just pulling you right up the side of the building there. So there's no limit of fun that you can have shooting low light on this camera. And with the IBIS and with the image stabilization on the lens, you're just going to get more and more creative, and you can work faster and faster. And I've seen people struggling with tripods to do similar sorts of things, and believe me, I am more than happy to have a lower megapixel camera that I can just shoot up at the scene and walk around and get really creative. It's about working fast, working methodically, and creating the very best images that you can get from these situations. So, right, let me take you to some other fun stuff. I wanted to sort of also cross over with this into a bit of street photography, because I kept thinking that this would also be a very viable thing. I've also been on a mad rampage around London with the R6, taking photographs of staircases. I went through and photographed quite a number of mad staircases and mad locations over the few days that I was there. Everything from industrial car parks to brutalist architecture to museum staircases, all sorts of stuff. And it was really good fun to do. But I also did some street photography in the sense of some people photography, and tried all sorts of different manner of things. here's a good tip for you to start you off. Go to Docklands and go on the Docklands cable car that goes up and over to the O2. What a fabulous thing to go and do. You can create these sorts of really fun, minimal pictures. Get your camera, put your hand around the back of the lens, put the lens right against the window, and reduce the amount of reflections that you can get around the glass. And as the cable car takes off, it does this huge sort of climb and then fall. And this is the point where it's going up to the climb, the maximum climb. But you can see here, look, it's really great fun because I've got these people coming over. We've got the distant tower blocks over on the O2 side, and of course the big ski pole, if you like, that's stuck up in the middle. It's got the wires attached to it all. So this is a really great fun thing to do. Now you see it's in black and white. Well, I always shoot color styles. I'm always shooting color styles in flipping between black and white, fine detail, and neutral. And the reason why I choose, for example, the black and white mode and don't just do it actually in in Photoshop or in Lightroom when I get back home is because of the fact being that I like to be able to see in black and white. So setting the camera to black and white and composing everything around you in black and white trains you to start thinking about textures and patterns. And also it will simplify everything by removing color. So that's a really good point that I would say about the strength of the the strength of the mirrorless camera. It allows you to do that. Now, this is also taken from the same cable car. It's a little bit murky looking. It's because it was high summer. It was 34 degrees. It was right in the middle of the August week, as you might remember. When we were all frying from plus 30, and there's some reflection coming off the glass here because it's domed and there's nothing much more I can do, but it still works and it gives an alternative cityscape view of the O2. But what I was really interested in when I looked at this was I spotted this walkway that seems to go all the way around here, and I'll come back to that at a certain point later in the talk. Now, over on Docklands, there's the Tide, which is some unusual looking, straightforward architectural shooting. In that sense, you can shoot wide, you can shoot in with a wide angle lens and just position everything so that your verticals are straight. And one of the things that I've been doing on both of these experiences, considering a lot of this is architecture, is leaving the tilt shift lens at home. Now, the reason why is because A, it was more additional bulk, but B, because of the fact being that I didn't want to make this specific talk about this camera all about tilt shift lenses and other highly technical equipment and being tripod based. As far as I was concerned, I was imagining that the first time buyer of either an M6 Mark II or the R6 was going to be somebody that wouldn't be doing just architecture. They'd be using it for all sorts of things. So none of these images contain corrected perspective lenses. They're all just wide angles, exactly as they are. The really great thing is that you can start to simplify this chaotic building by using other buildings and juxtaposing it from one building to the other. And as you walk around these environments, you get to see sort of higher viewpoints and higher perspectives. And I found that, again, this was all absolutely fascinating. I think, I'm not too sure, but somewhere here there's a picture of, there we go, people climbing over the O2. Apparently you can take a walking tour and go up over the O2. I'd like to do that personally. I bet that'd be quite fun. Overall, I think you have to clamp yourself in those. You get a special harness with a wire, because I can imagine if you tumble down the side of that, that's going to be pretty miserable. So I love this picture because of all the frenzy of lines going in each and every direction. So you keep your eye out when you're a street land architectural sort of, you can even say cityscape photographer, for all sorts of unusual things, and keep your eye peeled for different perspectives on things that have been, heavily photographed before. Just to go back to the Docklands cable cars ones, this is one I really love, which was a very abstract picture of these cable cars coming up over. Of course, they're coming up to that big tower that's hidden behind this building, but it all sort of nets together in this wonderfully minimal view. So that was one of my favorite pictures actually from the summer London trip. I thought that was really quite wonderful, because also I got the cable cars literally the same space apart, coming up in pairs, even though they're actually going in different directions. So that was a example of timing that I really wanted to get. So from the people photography perspective, I went down to King's Cross, and there's this really wonderful lollipop lounge, as it's called. And this was quite fun because of the fact being that, again, with the smaller camera gear, you don't look as conspicuous. And this is one of the things that's so wonderful about modern camera gear in comparison to how it used to be many years ago. I remember when my main camera, and I started shooting architecture and things on it, was a 1DS Mark III. And if you remember that camera, it's like the 1DX series. It's very large, and it's it screams professional, is the first thing. The other thing is, as well, is you match that up with a 100 to 400 lens, should we say, or the equivalent at the time, which would have been the Mark I. And it's a big, big camera. You start lifting this up and moving it around, and shall I say, God forbid, pointing it at people, and suddenly everybody thinks either you're a press photographer or you're doing things that are suspicious, and all these things happen. Now, if you reduce the kit down, now if you take the R6 being a smaller footprint body than the M6, than the 5D4, and the M6 being smaller again, if you're just standing there with a tiny camera taking a picture, no one notices you. You're invisible. So this is great for the street photographer overall. So again, this is all shot using the M6 Mark II, which is rather respectable. I think it's 33 megapixels, which is fantastic for what it can do. It's really, really something. And it was really great to do these sort of further back pictures, getting lifestyle images of people who were just sitting around sunbathing, enjoying the experience. And I like the fact it said Lollipop Lounge on these precast concrete lollipops or whatever they are. And again, just an example of what happens again. And people are only being protective. We got buzzed by security, and somebody came up and just said, "Oh, just thought I'd just ask what you were doing." And I just said, "I'm a travel photographer. I just love being here. I'd never seen this before. I'm taking pictures." "Oh, okay. Could I just say, please don't take photographs of children?" I said, "No, of course not. The last thing I'll be doing. I'm just taking photographs of this location. It's unique. I've never seen it before." Big smile, thumbs up. "Yeah, thanks ever so much, mate. Cheers, bye." You're no need to start getting worried about rights. And, you know, I was well within my right to say I can photograph exactly what I want. I'm in a public place. It's no problem at all. But you can see where this would lead. So it's just keep it cool. Be absolutely fine with everybody, and you'll get the right photographs. This image is a square. Another thing I forgot to say, the beauty of the mirrorless system again over the DSLR is the fact that with the R6, with the M6 Mark II, and all the M series cameras, and all of the mirrorless I keep saying mirrorless DSLR because it's a mirrorless system, isn't it? Not a DSLR. So the thing is that the cameras all have aspect ratios and crop settings. I am a avid user of the crop. So what I'm doing a lot of the time is composing pictures with square. I'll go into the aspect ratio. I will choose a square. I will make the camera work so that the crop fits the picture. Now, if you go and crop a RAW and you take it down to 16:9, should we say, does that now mean that you will be throwing away pixels and that you'll never get them back? The answer is no. All it does is it sets up crop marks in Lightroom so that when you open your image, Lightroom, Camera Raw, Capture One, whatever, what it will do is it will say, right, this was a 16:9 crop and the crop settings are here. And then when you import the picture into your given RAW processor, it will crop the image automatically. Now, when you look on the back screen, you won't see that. So if you set square, for example, you will have this additional space either side. It will give you bars down the side. And I wish, and I've been wishing for ages, that we could go back to the way it looks on my old EOS M3, which is I had a masked view. So when I was playing back through my pictures in playback and I came across a whole batch of squares, I just saw a square image on playback. But you can't do that. They only have lines now, because the idea was that you could see what was outside of the photograph, because you might be relevant to you and you might want to therefore take the picture again, or you could maybe crop it differently when you got back on the computer. But I always found that that was actually a detachment, and they should have a menu item in the playback menu that says playback cropped images, masked or with bars, so you could have either, and it would be so nice. But I can't get anyone to develop it. Just a bit of a shame. So let me give you with the people. We'll carry on with the people concept. I want to just show you these. So came across this motorbike. It's a cracking motorbike. And whilst I was photographing it, the guy who owns the motorbike came up and walked up to me and my friend Mike. Mike's Greek, and he obviously grew up in Greece, speaks fluent Greek, and turns out the guy who owns this bike is Greek. So they had a fantastic conversation about everything. And this guy let me photograph his motorbike. And let me just show you how you photograph something like this. And in this case, also the guy that owns the motorbike at the same time. You get low. This thing is all powerful. It's a monster machine. And the idea is that you're going to, rather than just photograph it at head height, looking down on it slightly like that, it doesn't really do much to really exaggerate the strength of the bike. Then this comes back to the principles of portrait photography. So in other words, imagine you're photographing a model. If you photograph eye height to your model, completely same height, there's a feeling of equality. If you photograph your model from below and you're looking up and the model folds their arms and looks down or something like that, then they are all powerful. And if you are higher than the model and you look down on the model and he or she is looking upwards, it reduces their impact and it makes you dominant and makes them submissive in that sense. Now, by playing around with the same energy, not only with this motorbike, but also with buildings, works exactly the same with buildings. So let's go back to Leadenhall, where all these things are just vortexes of lines going up, these massive, massive buildings. And now look at this massive motorbike photographed at 18 millimeters APS-C. So it's not really that wide, but I've got down low and I've accentuated the power by making the front wheel way bigger than the back wheel, which is a gigantic back wheel, by the way. Then you start to notice details, things like the fuel tank. Freedom is a full tank. How fantastic. And the chrome and everything that's going on around it, which is really good. I've now shot this a wide aperture, f5 on this particular lens. It only goes to f4, but I've done a detail and it's thrown the background out. You don't need to over describe the background. Do you see what I mean? Why do you need to be able to see all those cars and their number plates? You don't. So you need to step back, zoom in slightly, recompose, and then shoot a much wider aperture to throw out the background completely. You'll then find a detail that you particularly like. I like police special written on the dial there, which is great. And you can see it's just got an interesting set of circles, an interesting set of lights and darks as well, from the chrome handlebars to the chrome rings and the fuel tanks and all sorts of stuff. But and then notice the number plate. Look, fat. Now, did I do it standing up? No, you come right down to the level of the number plate itself, and then you again get reasonably close to the tire, and suddenly the tire seems gigantic. And it was must have been getting on for nearly a foot thick. It was enormous. And I was imagining what it must be like to ride this crazy machine. And then the guy turns up himself, and looking like Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, I have to say. And he was great fun, and we had a really good conversation about his bike, and we got into great conversations about everything anyway. But this was the fun thing to do, was that, can you notice that he's actually in conversation with my friend Mike? He's not in conversation with me. And the thing is that that's actually made the picture, because it's much more relaxed without him looking at the photograph. And then I got one with him looking at the photo, which I think, looking at the camera rather, which also worked particularly well until I spotted there's a, oh, there, that's his sandwiches. I remember now. He put his sandwiches around the back of the bike, except we can see them. But you can see he looks relaxed, and he looks comfortable, and he looks very empowered in the scene here as well. And then I got one of him laughing. He was just, again, talking to Michael and laughing his head off about stuff. So can you see that not one of those images is me standing up beside the fuel tank detail? The rest of it is all right down on the ground. It's low level. It makes the bike seem big and powerful, and it really works for the portrait shoot as well. It's really good fun to do, and that definitely the photograph that worked. Never met him before, got his email address, sent him all the photographs as a thank you, used him on his social media. stuff like that. It makes the world go round, doesn't it? It really does. And that's exactly why I do these things at the same time as well. So let me take you to some really wonderful bits of abstract architecture. Let's go here. This is Adams Plaza, which is in Canary Wharf. And if you haven't been to Canary Wharf, I suggest you get yourself down there. It is something else. Something else for a whole load of different reasons. I reckon I've just scratched the surface of what I can do down there, really. And this is the walkway. It's a very famous picture. Again, it's just a cliche. It doesn't matter. I'm testing camera kit. I'm enjoying the experience of having fun with the photographs. And can I just say to you a very important perspective here, which is this banister here and this one here is absolutely dead level. Now, I've lifted the height of the camera and dropped the height of the camera down and upwards to make sure that those banisters, handrails, are absolutely dead straight. So they are completely in the middle of the picture. Then what I've done is I've done the same with this vertical strip light. So the strip light is reflecting off the steel stroke aluminium floor, and it's got to be absolutely centered. If you're not smack bang in the middle, right in the very center like this, then what happens is you'll get this effect where the strip light will be slightly over and the reflection will be slightly over. As you bring yourself into the middle, the two will line up like so. And as you go too far, they'll go like that again. You can see what we're doing. We're trying to get that reflection absolutely perfect. And then we're trying to get it smack bang in the middle. Now, how do you know when you're smack bang in the middle? And the answer is this. You go and turn on the grid mode. Now, everybody goes, oh, yeah, the 3x3 grid. No, no, no. You don't turn on the 3x3 grid. You turn on the 6x6 grid. Or was it 6x4? 6x4 grid. And the 6x4 gives you a center line and gives you a center line horizontally and a few more, obviously, above and below. But it's the fact that it gives you a true middle position, which you can align with this point here. And this will then help you align this reflection and the strip light, and it will help you align your railings. So in other words, it's crouching down a little bit, and you can do that again by flipping out the screen. One of the wonderful things about that particular both cameras, the M6 and the R6 as well. So I went back, and this has happened, which is just fantastic. This is right in the same place again, same technique. I've done this as a 16:9 panorama done on the R6. I really love this. It's just an installation, like a wrap, a plastic sort of wrap that they've done all the way down through it. Well, I hope it stays for quite some time. I can't remember the name of the artist, but they've done a remarkable job of it. It's extremely eye-catching. All I can imagine now is a model shoot, having a couple or something standing in this gigantic vortex. It would just look really something. And I photographed this about 7 p.m. It was dark about 5 o'clock. So this is, right into the evening. That doesn't matter, of course, if you're shooting scenes which don't contain sky. You're quite okay to keep shooting architecture indoors, or, for example, on the underground, or whatever you fancy doing, when, of course, there's the skies have gone to complete black. But look at the variations I did of the same thing. So I got a couple of guys walking. You can see they've got face masks on, walking through the walkway there. I got a lovely movement of his foot, like kicking forwards. Again, an eighth of a second handheld is no problem for this camera whatsoever. But I've gone for a different composition. I've gone off to the side to try and get this, as you can see, a sort of vortex of light going either way. Then I've waited till they've gone and taken a photograph of them whilst they've gone past to give me variation. And then I've got a couple of girls who've walked up through the middle. I'm really frustrated because when I actually lifted the camera to my eye and I went to initially take the shot, I hadn't focused, and the camera just took a little bit of time to focus. And as they were walking, they were actually veering right. And one of the images has not only this girl here and this one with the light going down in between them in the center here, but their reflections are also on the top of the plastic that you can see there. You can see a sort of fuzzy, sort of fragmented shadow that's at the top. And I'm so gutted because the picture would have been perfect, but it's out of focus. I don't mean like very tinily. I mean it's considerably out because of the speed I brought the camera up when I saw the scene happening. But why not get down to the ground, right down, look up, completely different perspective on the same thing again, and you'll get a totally different view. So Owen's asked a question here, actually, which I want to answer right now. He says, does the R5 compare to the EOS 5D4 in low light? I think he might have asked that a little bit earlier, but I'll answer that anyway. I wouldn't be worrying too much if you are a 5D4 owner that suddenly the camera is completely obsolete. It's not the case, and I think that's an important thing. What you're getting when you are using the 5D Mark IV in comparison to the R6 is a larger image size, but what you are lacking, and I think this is the most important point, is you're lacking the in-body image stabilization, which when matched with the lens it beats it hands down. The stuff you can do with this camera when you've actually got the time, in other words, not just like lifting it and clicking, but just composing, deep breath, technique, etc. I mean, I managed the other day, because I have a lone R5 at the moment as well. I managed half a second in a dark forest inside Dartmoor, half a second with the 24-105 RF lens. And I think the RF lenses are even better with image stabilization, which is another reason to start leaning in towards the EOS R5, R6 angle, the EOS R, and the RF system, because the image stabilization I think is even better. So you match that with the IBIS as well, and you're really going to get a great result. And I wished I'd had the 24-105 when I did this shoot. It's no slouch of a lens. It's really sharp from side to side at all apertures, wide open all the way to obviously your f11s, f16s. But the f4 is really good as well. So it's the bit I'm missing. I'm missing 30 millimeters in my full frame setup, because I've got 24-70 and I've got a 100-400. And if I could have a 24-105 and the new 100-500, well, that'd be pretty much everything I'd need. One camera body, two lenses, and that'd just be absolutely perfect. I think it really would. So all these, in other words, if you're a 5D4 user owner and you're thinking suddenly everything's getting redundant, the answer is it's not. And if you are, if you're heading that direction, if you're thinking about an upgrade to an RF body, an R6 and R5, they are one brilliant upgrade. I would thoroughly recommend them. I'm only still going through additional features yet. I'm still doing bits of video, trying different video settings, but I'm finding personally that my computers are not up to the video, the complicated video, because of the fact that the video files are so big, especially on the R5 as well. But there's a whole myriad of reasons to go with these mirrorless cameras. And if you're suddenly thinking, hang on, well, I'm so used to using a mirror, is this going to be a problem? Does it chew batteries and all these sorts of other things? The answer is no. They've got high-powered batteries. The batteries last a day of conservative shooting. They've got power-saving modes. There's all these things that you can do to preserve battery life. Just like any computer that you get, you have to work out, you have to go through the menus, you have to learn the menus, you have to, and also tweak those menus, because it comes back to this again. And I have mentioned it before when doing talks, that these cameras contain firmware and operating systems that are generic, and they are like that because we have to take that generic menu system and modify it to suit the requirements that we have. If this is why there will never be a landscape camera. You'll never get a Canon landscape orientated camera. You will get a camera that's high megapixel, or you'll get a camera that is lower megapixel in that sense, like the R6. And you will find that R6 users with very high frame rate will want to be using it for action, for documentary, for news, for a reportage, for all those sorts of action-orientated things, probably more than your R5 user. Your R5 user will be wanting it for large output, for considered, well-thought-out, high-resolution imagery, as well as your high-resolution architecture, as well as all of these different disciplines. But the great thing is whereas beforehand the systems seem to be very much in their own boxes. You bought, for example, a 1D series for sports, and then you bought a 1DS series for everything else. And, they were insanely good weather sealed cameras. Now what you're getting is this larger overlap where each camera can do what it is that you want with two different price points, and each one will overlap very nicely into the field of the other. But depending on where your requirements are, for example, I have a good friend, Kevin, and Kevin's bought an R6 and he does street photography, and he's been doing all sorts of stuff. He actually lives in the Cambridge area, believe it or not, and Kevin Gordon, and he's been doing all sorts of stuff, nighttime scenes, nighttime sort of abstract portraiture, taking photographs of steamed windows on restaurants with black silhouetted figures in the background, things like that. So he's using it for a whole myriad of different reasons than perhaps the standard R6 user would be using it for. For me, I'd be wanting bonkers architecture. I'd be wanting to have great fun doing all of these sorts of possibilities, from abstract pictures to to everything from travel photography. And I haven't even mentioned, and this is probably the other part that I really want to lean towards, and I think it's mainly because of the fact being I haven't been able to go traveling with one of these cameras yet due to our current circumstance. But the eye focusing and any of the face detection, animal detection, and just simply being able to lock onto a subject, no priority, as they call it, that is absolutely remarkable. And I went to Glastonbury Tour fairly recently with the R5, and I spent 4 days going up to Glastonbury Tour photographing misty mornings. And I can digress and go into something totally different for the fun of it. And essentially speaking, what happened was that and it will render, by the way, it's not just going to stay a blurry mess. What happened was that there was a crow sitting in front of me, and I put on the animal detection, and it locked immediately onto the crow's face. The crow was pecking in the grass, and this bracket was just going up and down with the crow's head. Eventually, the crow lifted into the air and then got buffeted by the wind and sort of shot off really fast to the right. And I swung the 24-105 round as I followed it and just did 2 shots. I just had it in single shot. I wasn't expecting to do a burst or anything like that. Both absolutely pin sharp. It was incredible, and the fact that it can do that is really something. So I haven't had a chance to be able to do a portrait shoot. I haven't had a chance to be able to have a crowd of people and go, he's the guy I want, and for it to stay focusing on one person, which is what it can do, or to have 3 faces and just be able to use the joystick on the back and just jump between which face I want to focus on, or eye focus detection on the eyes and be able to just literally go, okay, well, this one's the lead eye, I'll photograph with this one in focus, or to be able to swap at any given stage to the other eye just by toggling left and right. All these ingenious new things that are starting to be developed that have come from the EOS R and have now been pushed into this monster set of cameras, the R5 and the R6, is really, really something. And I think that you have to remember that this is making our lives so much easier. It's making photography so much more exciting, because it means that the success rate is going up, the hit rates are going up in that sense, and this gives you more confidence in your photography as well. It gives you more ability to connect with any scene. So I'm thinking, I want to go and shoot some wildlife. If it can pick up birds that easily, if it can photograph animals that straightforward, then maybe I could have a go at shooting wildlife as well. I've never really done it. I mean, I've done a small level of it, but I've always found myself more involved in shape and form and experiences in the cities. I'm addicted to the effects that humanity have on the built environment as much as the landscape, as much as having nothing in the landscape other than the natural world, mountains. Or I love all of it. I can't get enough of it. And I've always found the reasons why I've never wanted to shoot wildlife is because I've never had the camera that can do it. This camera, the 5D4, has leaned that way a little bit, but still not as much. But now, if I could have something that would help me detect faces and tracking, and the tracking being so much better, not just specific to the 1DX series of cameras, but something that's going to be specific to, these smaller systems that are way lighter, but so powerful. you know, I'm gonna do wildlife photography. Why not? Let's do everything. Let's do the lot. I'm gonna finish with some spiral staircases. I love a good natter, and I could probably end up talking the hind legs of a donkey with all this, but um, this is a really lovely opportunity to get a 7-story spiral going up here in central London. I've got some other ones as well. There was I found these two as well. This is in the Queen's House, which is down in Greenwich. A very famous staircase called the Tulip Staircase. And I found out from talking to the people in there that it's called the Tulip Staircase, even though it's not tulips, it's supposed to be roses as little emblems on these banisters. And the reason is because when somebody did some repair work on it in the 1800s or something, they wrote invoice for Tulip Staircase, thinking that it was all tulips, and that's how it got its nickname, so to speak. So again, why not just copy what I've done here? Just go in and try these things out for yourself. It's this is just a grey, wet morning in Greenwich. I've gone into Greenwich, and it was pouring with. It was lovely and sunny when I got there, and then pouring with rain as I just managed to get into the house before, just when it opened. But there's all sorts of spirals and things that you can photograph in central London. But let me just conclude then. So, and let's conclude while looking at this bizarre looking staircase. Okay, so if you want to just reiterate the gear that makes a city and low light experience hit the dartboard, then I would say that you're better off A, being centrally located, B, returning and dropping off your heavyweight gear, and then picking up your heavyweight gear at the end of the evening and wandering around with a much more compact system in the day. It will make you less irritable. It'll mean that you thoroughly enjoy what you're doing. Or you do this, which is you just manipulate the equipment so that you have something like a small mirrorless SLR. So, for example, like your the R6 or R5 or something like that, and you just maybe take 1 or 2 lenses at the very most. So you reduce down the amount of weight, and don't take a tripod. Then return back, grab the tripod. If you've only got the one set of gear, then grab the tripod, any additional gear, and then go out with that for the evening. The South Bank's particularly hard to photograph because you will find that people don't like using tripods. Respect that. It's fine. It's private land. Just respect that that's the way that it is. And again, with security guards, just literally be friendly, smile, even go and speak to them and ask them if it's okay if you take photos. Most of the time, most of them are totally all right. It's the people who drive them mad, who just who get all hot-headed with them, that this causes problems. So secondly, don't be afraid of ISO. Always push the ISO on your cameras. Just, don't worry about ISO 1600. Don't worry about ISO 3200. It will make really, really good imagery regardless. And if you only have the camera without a tripod, then that's what you have. Just watch your shutter speeds. Make sure that as you're composing, you're thinking about the available depth of field. Do you really need to be shooting f16? No, you don't. Shoot wider, shoot f8. This is shot at f8. And just learn your depth of field with your lenses. So if you've got a 1635 or equivalent, then learn how much depth of field you get at 16 millimeters. Do some test shots at home. Learn how much you get at 35 millimeters, etc. And then realize when you're out in the field, and check your work all the time. Look on the back screen, zoom in. Use the viewfinder when you're zoomed in. So zoom into the picture and look through the viewfinder and scroll around the image and just check it's all sharp before you leave. Check the edges of the picture, the sides of the picture, the top and bottom of the picture. Make sure it's all right before you walk away. Because if you do all of this, then what will happen is you'll just end up with a higher and higher hit rate, and that will just give you greater end results. And your London portfolio or similar will be worthwhile in that sense. You will get the images that you plan to get. The other thing is as well is that choose your timing correctly. Make sure that you if you're going to go down first thing in the morning and take photographs in central London, that you're going to go to areas that you're going to get light, you're going to get form and shape, or you're going to get, for example, like this one, which is a large panorama of Canary Wharf from the O2 side. You're going to get the right result. I mean, it's the wrong result. That's the O2. No, sorry, that's the Canary Wharf from this side. Oh, I'm trying to remember it's completely opposite Canary Wharf on the opposite side of the Thames, to give you some kind of idea. It doesn't look that exciting, does it? At all. The other thing is, as well, is that you'll notice at the moment, if you wander around places like this, the biggest issue is that there's a lot of tower blocks without any lights on, because people are working from home. This is the way it all is. You go down there on a Saturday and you go wandering around Canary Wharf on a Saturday, you're not going to find many people there. So it's going to be devoid of people, which could actually be quite good if you're wanting to do pictures of, tower blocks, etc. And I've got some, in fact, if we just go to an M6 picture that I did in the summer, if I can find it. There you go. That's classic Canary Wharf with no one in it. There's no one anywhere on the weekends. It's just again 9 p.m. at night, using the 11 to 22 lens to give a kind of architectural perspective on it. But don't expect to find people in a business district on the weekends. That can be really good, but it can also be a bit strange how there's just empty streets. It looks quite apocalyptic in that end at the same time. So just pick your timings and make sure that when you do visit, that you've got a plan, and you've got an idea of what it is that you want to go and photograph and what you want to do. So you combine your technical know-how with a really good idea and a really good plan. And if you can do that, you'll be going from one place to the next, to the next, to the next, and you'll be getting picture after picture, and it will really, really work. We've got a question come in. David Clapper. Cool. I like being called David Clapper. That'll do. Are the spiral staircase and the tunnel shots taken using a tripod, or were they handheld? Everything was handheld. There was nothing that was taken using a tripod. I did have a tripod for the Canary Wharf panorama shot I showed you earlier. And other than that, everything you're seeing was handheld. The reason, because I was testing this out and I was trying to work out exactly whether I could use this camera as the low light go-to camera for street photography without all the complication, and it thoroughly passed the test. Here's people cycling through Greenwich Tunnel when they're not supposed to. Says no cycling everywhere. Says no cycling about every 20 meters. It's on the wall and things, and just everyone cycles through it. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this. The main thing to say at the very end now is firstly to thank everybody from Canon UK and from Campkins as well. I do hope you've enjoyed this animated talk of mine. I'm very passionate about what can be created, and I'm very excited about the future. I'm very excited about what we can do for in the next 10 years in specific. I mean, this new batch of cameras that's come out, okay, it's very easy to just go, it's too much. It's too much money. I have a system that works for me. It's completely fine. I will say this, which is, as things start moving forwards, as you start to think about upgrading gear, whatever you're going to do, these systems are then going to start getting passed down into other systems. We've seen it with the EOS R, the RF, which still is an amazing, very lightweight, very affordable camera. And now we've seen Canon go totally the other way into the Pro series R5 and R6. They are exceptional bits of kit, and I thoroughly recommend that you at least go and try one out to see its perspective. If all you do is tripod mounted landscapes, you can shoot anything. Doesn't really matter. If all you're going to do is tripod mounted landscapes, you're never going to see the benefits of all of the additional things that are inside these cameras. But if what you're trying to do is push your photography to new boundaries, to take new steps further forwards, to more experiments, to like I'm going to try and do with with wildlife or with action photography of different kinds, or if you want to, if you're an avid traveler then save your pennies and go and buy something like an R5 or an R6 if you're getting to the stage where you're needing an upgrade, because both of those cameras are really going to push your work further forward. And don't forget about the APS-C. Don't forget about that M6 as well. An M6 Mark II, not only is it great for stills, but it's also bloody good at video. And if you're a vlogger or a blogger, or you like taking video and creating video, then I can thoroughly recommend that camera as a B-roll camera, as for doing pieces to camera whilst you're out and about. It's an incredibly versatile little thing. If I had to sit here now and go, right, what's my dream setup? It will be as follows. Devoid of money, of course. I'd have an R5 for landscapes, for everything that I wanted to do with high resolution, for the video side of it as well. And I do believe that once I fully understand that a bit better, I'm going to move further forwards into that as well. But the creative video, it's looking exceptionally good. My computer systems are going to have to catch up. That's the other thing. That's another reason why I'm a little bit hesitant at the minute. The R6 for all the low light capabilities, and also for its rapid fire spontaneity. It's an amazing camera for all of that. And then finally, I would have a 24-105. I would have a 100 to 500, and they would be my wander around go-to lenses for travel photography and city photography. I would definitely keep using my 24mm tilt shift without a doubt. Amazing piece of kit. Don't forget the 1.4. You can stick onto the 100 to 400 or 100 to 500. In this case, you can put a 1.4 on that as well. It gives you amazing reach. So you get these fabulous like designed cameras and lenses that go together, and when you pack it all down, it's probably somewhere in the region of about 6 kilos. It's not as much as you think. If you get all your camera gear out and weigh it, and I've weighed my 5D4, my 24-70 and 100-400, and it weighs just under 4 kilos. So this whole weight thing, and everyone says, oh, I'm going to go to different camera brands and everything. Just weigh all your stuff before you start doing anything crazy. And then an M6, M6 Mark II for daytime stuff. I already have the 3 lenses that I've got, and I've had them for 6 years. So that's more than enough kit for anybody. And I think that would literally be everything that you would ever need to create some really excellent and fun images from your travels. So don't forget, Campkins. We got a cashback winter deal going. Go and have a look. There's a massive list of stuff in there. I was really surprised. I thought it was only 3 items, and then I started scrolling, and it scrolled and scrolled and scrolled with all these cashback deals. So go and have a look in there again anyway and see what you can find. But on behalf of Owen at Campkins, on behalf of Cambridge Photography Week, on behalf of Canon UK, and behalf of myself, I would like to wish you a good evening. Thank you for watching me. Hopefully we'll be back again to do something equally as exciting. I'll probably have a ton of more information to talk to you about with regard to not only the technical, but also the creative art of Canon photography. Thank you very much.